Well, the ayes had it yesterday on the floor of the Senate. That was how it transpired yesterday. Well, to discuss this particular issue, and, has this been blown out of proportion? Is this, a storm on a teacup that is threatening to get out of hand? We have with us this morning Abosede George-Ogan, who's the Executive Director of Women in Leadership Advancement Network, WILLAN. Thank you so much for coming to Sunrise Elite this morning, Abosede.
Thank you so much for having me, Marco. Good to be here.
Well, this is what we saw, and even though, we're hoping to use this to look at the general issues of women in leadership, this particular issue is quite disturbing, because last week we saw what transpired on the floor, or we saw snippets, because we're not there, and it's only what the cameras can capture that they will capture and tell us, and we'll make of it what we can. But what we saw transpire last week was supposed to be a disagreement around seats, but it does appear that there is more to it than meets the eye. What is your own reading of what has transpired, and even the comments of some of our colleagues on the floor who think that this is being blown out of proportion? This is not about gender. This is just about disobedience, a refusal to just, obey the rules that we all abide by.
Yes. I mean, I think, and I appreciate you sort of maybe nudging us to look at the broader picture, and then we can sort of hone in on this specific case that's before us, right? If you look at the Red Chamber, there are only 4 women, actually.
Oh, 4,
not 5. Yes. There are 4 women out of 109. So I appreciate the male senators who are saying this is not a gender issue, but that's why it's important to sort of take the sort of context in which this is happening, right? You always need to pay attention to the context, because then that helps the reading that you're talking about. So if you have a chamber that is filled with mostly men, so 105 to 4 women, all duly elected, no doubt, it already paints a picture of the pre-existing challenges, of the difficulty of women getting into those positions. Because I know we want to, there's this, oftentimes we say, oh, is everybody can run, right? But we know, and I think that Senator Akpoti Uduaghan is a great example of what we saw. We sat here during the 2023 elections and observed all the challenges that she had to go through. Then might I remind us as well that she actually didn't win. Do you remember that? She actually won through appeal. Yeah,
she wasn't declared.
She wasn't declared winner at the time.
At the time.
Exactly.
She had to go to the courts.
She had to go to the courts. So I'm trying to first paint a picture of the hurdles, right, that female elected leaders have to go through. And so then let's bring it back into current day.
Are you saying then that it is difficult to divorce gender from this?
Oh, no, absolutely. I am saying that categorically. And that's why I took time for those who might not understand to create the context. I am sure that there are some distinguished senators that are embarrassed about what's going on in terms of the proportion of women who are represented in the Senate. So that's why I'm saying this is the context, because whatever, even if a fight ensued and you were going to go to court or go to the police station, they would ask you what happened, who was there, who started, who talked. And so I think it's important to paint that context. And then if we come to present day, what I find really interesting, and it's really ironical as well, is that the Senate president has also found himself in this same situation a few years ago, videos of which have now resurfaced, right? And I think what I find really interesting is, are we then saying that back then he should have been referred to the ethics committee? Because obviously it's different times, different situations, different scenarios, and different leadership, right? And also different colleagues. And so all of a sudden, the rules that applied then don't apply now. And so as much as people want to make gender issues a petty issue, I'm trying to stay on point as to the fact that we need to look at these 2 issues. By the way, one thing I find really interesting, if you watch the video, as you said, we don't have the full clip. However, within the clip that we have, it was less than 30 seconds into her standing on her privileges, right? Based on the Senate rules, that the Senate president was he was commenting that the Sergeant at Arms come take her out. It was less than 30 seconds into that video. As you said, that's what we saw. But into that video, if you look at it, and that tells you, she has not even maybe finished making that complaint. So what have you predicted that is going to be said that makes you think she should already be thrown out? So this is why, as much as people say it's not a gender issue, I do not think you can divorce gender from this. And I think, hopefully before we end this conversation, we can talk about why we need additional seats for women in our legislature. I think it's just high time, because lone voices cannot fight this type of battles.
Yeah, but what exactly is the battle? That's the question,
Well, I think that's really interesting, right?
What exactly is
and
the
as
battle?
you said, we're not in those chambers. We would love to be a fly on the wall, right? But it's evident, and I think that's why, let's even take the fact, that's why I painted the double standard. That's what I would call that, right? Because in short, in that video, which we saw of the current president a few years ago, he was shouting and, pacing around, while she kept to the, she kept to the law. She kept to the rules of the Senate. She kept standing, but she wasn't giving. So even that clip, to your point, my read on it is she wasn't given a fair chance to actually even protest what she was protesting about. Just a fair chance to finish, and then there could have been a response, which if that came with take her out, whatever it is, that would have happened. But she wasn't. It was 22 seconds, 21 or 22 seconds in. I would like people to go and see that. And that worries me based on what we know. Obviously, if you've listened to other interviews of her, she has categorically said that she feels she is being maligned, sidelined. She feels that she's being bullied. These are her words, right? And that, there's more to it. So she has indicated that. But to your point, we don't know what those details are. But we're just reading what we know and sticking to the facts. And that's why I'm saying, let's look at the broader picture. It is bad enough that we don't have women there. By the way, in terms of, the support that she would then get on the floor, that's why I'm saying we need more women in there. Women cannot be lone voices fighting this battle. And, you asked the question of what the battle is. But the battle is the battle of underrepresentation, if you ask me, right? Because if we had half the Senate as women, I'm sure you know that this would look different.
Well, I believe that there might be other perspectives, but this is what we are seeing now. She's now been referred to the Committee on Ethics and Privileges, and it's unclear if she's going to get a fair hearing, because when you hear what some of her colleagues have said, I mean, they also feel quite offended. It's interesting we didn't get to hear from any of the female colleagues if they also felt that, she hasn't been, but it's so far so good. We have heard from the men, and we've heard from some of our colleagues who are male.
And now, who's going to be in the ethics committee?
That's a big question.
Your guess is as good as mine, right?
So there'll be questions as to, even though sometimes some people say the fact that the woman is there, might not exactly make any changes. But I don't know.
That is irrelevant. Should I tell you why? Because there is sufficient evidence of what the results of having male leadership has been. So if you look at over the years, right, there is more evidence, to your point, because we've not had enough women, right? We're only able to gather data from a few women who have been both in the high, low chamber, in the Senate and in the House, right? So at the end of the day, they are just too few for us to categorically say, oh, there's no benefits. But we know that there are benefits. Where women have been given an opportunity to perform, we know that there's collective benefit when women lead.
Yeah, it's different from when a woman is made chairman by a committee of men. So sometimes some people say, oh, there will be that need to want to overdo. I don't know. I mean, these are some of the things that we have heard. This is the same situation when you hear about maybe the sole black person in the midst of white people. Those kind of little differences sometimes.
Malka, this is the work that I do, and I'm really getting frustrated with us always trying to look for the other side. We have 109 senators, and we only have 4 women. How is this not a problem? And do we need to pick it apart in any other ways, what I'm talking about? It's completely irrelevant. Why, by the way? Because half the population is female. And they are our representatives. So for me, the conversation doesn't even need to go beyond that. But what we are then witnessing is the few women that we have are having to fight battles. And I know that, you know, left to you and I, we would love to name those battles. But as far as I'm concerned, it is enough that they're fighting battles when they're in the minority.
Are you a little concerned, though, that we did not hear from any of her colleagues?
Absolutely. I am a little concerned that we didn't hear from other female senators. But again, Margaret, this is the work that we do. We live in a patriarchal society. Do I need to remind us about that?
Is there a reason why they haven't spoken? Or maybe they have, and we just haven't, we've missed it.
There's that, and I think we should make room for that, you know, because we're not in all places at all times. However, women who are elected fight battles. And I think that there is wisdom in choosing the battles that you fight.
Indeed. Let me ask you quickly, if they will quickly contrast this. If you think there's a contrast, if you think there's a similarity with what Right Honourable Miranda also, you know, had to wade through last week. Because as I did highlight, it was a tough week for women in politics.
It was.
We saw on Monday, you know, was it I'm looking for the right words. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully because it does appear that, you know, the DSS has been listening in on conversations that the DSS is saying, look, that was not what transpired. But what we saw on the surface, on the surface, was that there were, you know, heavy security presence. It did appear that the speaker was prevented from, you know, entering the chambers. We also heard that our office was locked. That of the deputy speaker was locked. That of the acting clerk was locked. And you know, the DSS said, "Oh, we were invited." You know, but later on we saw that, you know, people made a way for her to enter the chambers, and you know, she got a lot of support from even her male colleagues. So I don't know if for you there's any contrast, because clearly she's also fighting a battle.
I just wanted to say, what contrast are we talking about?
Yeah, she's fighting a battle, but this time around it does appear that within the chambers where, you know, where her position is being challenged,
there's support.
There's support.
Yes. No, so I think what's interesting is there is no contrast. Again, because I want to keep this at a level of not personalities, right, but the broader issue, which I really want to invite people to look at. So I think to your point, what we should be looking out for is patterns, right? Patterns of power dynamics, right? Patterns of the way male elected officials are treated versus female. So I hear them on saying it's not a gender issue, but I still haven't seen, you know, that contention. Because I think with the Right Honourable Miranda, her own challenge is that there was a due process followed. Now, if there are other housekeeping issues, and I'll just term it as housekeeping issues, that is not, you know, and like you said, there's support in there. So again, that's one of those things where we don't know, there's more to it than meets the eye. And that's what I'm trying to say. So if you start to look at the patterns, right, similar to Senator Akpoti George-Ogan, there seems to be more than meet the eyes. And the question we should then ask ourselves is, what is this more than meet the eye battle that women have to fight that seemingly their male counterparts don't have to fight?
What message should women folk, because really, I mean, as you rightly highlighted, women are 50% of the population.
Absolutely.
What message, because much as we've been told that, you know, gender is not, this is not about gender, there is no way you have just 4 women in the Senate. I wish I could say National Assembly, but it's the Senate now. When you have 4 women out of 1.
But you also have 20 out of 469. So can we just maybe put that out there?
Put it out there, and that's the generality of the National Assembly. You know, so it's not like as if if it's any better in the House of Representatives.
No, it's not.
What message should women as a group be sending to the National Assembly at this time?
Well, first of all, I mean, I want to use this opportunity to thank both Right Honorable Miranda and Senator Akpoti. Should I tell you why? Because I really believe that they are fighting battles that will make way for the progress that we want to see. And if we don't have an opportunity to thank them, I want to use this opportunity to thank them, because we might not know now, but I'm really convinced that it's only a matter of time before we see the benefit of women who dare to speak up and who dare to rise. So that's the first thing. But what's the message? I think the message is really clear, that we need more women in leadership, Malkwe. And that's why I'm saying I'm struggling with the male colleagues that are saying this is not a gender issue. We need more women in positions of leadership, making decisions. So it's very simple, right? We need more men and women in those positions, or rather we need to have men and women in those positions making decisions for men and women. But right now, what we have is mostly men making decisions for men and women.
What if the men say, oh, look, this is the reason why we don't want the women? I mean, for you to follow the rules, your seat was changed. You don't need to be notified. Whenever it is you come in, you're notified of your new seat and you go there. That's what was so big in that, you know. This is the reason why, you know, we don't, I mean, I'm just playing it out.
Senator Akpabio did the same thing he's male, no?
We have to remind them, right?
And that's the double standard, right? Because it was, I don't know if you think that they were different scenarios, but it was the similar scenario. As I said, context and different things might be slightly different. But why are we using a different scale?
Yeah, you mentioned the fact that he wasn't referred to ethics, but I also heard in that whole old clip, he apologized. Senator
because he probably thought he had done something wrong. I think in this case, what is happening, based on what we saw, especially if that is all that transpired, I guess the question I would ask you is, do you think an apology is relevant? You know, was it a case of she caused chaos? It appeared to me that she was standing on Senate rules. So unless there is something else she should be apologizing for, right? And I mean, the point about, you know, the Senate is not a social media space or whatever it is. Nobody wants it to be. Actually, Nigerians have serious issues that we would really appreciate if our senators prioritized.
And I think it's a fine place to leave it. Abosede, it's always wonderful speaking with you. Abosede George-Ogan is the Executive Director of Women in Leadership Advancement Network.